So we're going to flip to our other side of our sheet. The most important things for heart blocks, guys, are your PR intervals. Remember, if there's any problem with your PR interval, we're thinking heart block. And then, on top of your PR interval, the most important thing is the regularity of the rhythm, okay? So first degree and third degree are regular interval R to R intervals. These are our regular rhythms. Second degree, both type 1 and type 2, are irregular. That is the most important tip and trick I can give you for the test. You need to memorize that as much as possible. So if you identify, if you're looking at a strip, right, you're going down your 5 questions, and you identify you've got a problem with your PR interval, then you need to refer back to what your regularity was, because you can get rid of half of the answer choices, depending on what your regularity was alone, okay? So we have first degree heart block. It has a regular R to R interval. It's PR interval, because remember, when we're talking about AV heart blocks, we're looking at our PR intervals. The first degree PR interval is fixed but prolonged. So can anybody tell me what prolonged means?
More than 5
Greater
boxes.
than 0.20 or 5 boxes. You're good. You're good. Lots of numbers today. So greater than 0.2, my PR interval is greater than 0.2 or greater than 5 boxes. Okay. Second degree, type 1 and type 2, remember, my R to R's are irregular. We're going to see examples of this in a minute. In second degree type 1, my P to P interval is also irregular. I'm going to show that to you in a minute. Your PR interval is a pattern that is predictable. It gets shorter. You can see my little arrows here. It gets shorter, it gets longer, it gets even longer, and then it drops. And then it's going to do it again because it's a pattern. It gets shorter, it gets longer, so much longer that it drops. Okay, so it's a pattern. You can predict when it's going to drop. So it's in first place. Okay, I'm type A. I like control, right? So if I can predict when it's going to drop, then that's in first place for me. Okay. Second degree type 2 is also irregular, right? Because they're both. Your P to P interval in second degree type 2 is regular. We're going to see a picture of this in a minute. Your PR interval, this is the most important part here, guys, is fixed but with dropped beats. So you can see the difference if you're looking at your sheet. Type 1 gets progressively longer and then it drops and then it repeats. Second degree type 2, my PR interval, my blue arrows, they remain the same and they drop at random. So that's why he's in second place, because I don't know when he's going to drop. That PR interval does not give me any clues. Third degree, you have a regular R to R and a regular P to P, but the difference is they don't match up, right? So I'm going to give you this example. Third degree heart block. Are these regular or irregular?
Regular.
The regular interval QRSs. Ignore the gap. Are these regular or irregular?
Regular.
The regular. I'm trying my best. Okay. It's like hand drawing these, like trying to get it to match perfectly. So I have regular interval P waves, and I have regular interval QRSs, right? What happens in third degree block? Hold on. So this is going at a rate of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So my ventricular rate is 60. My atrial rate is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So my ventricular rate is at 100. So does my atrial rate match my ventricular rate? No. No. So what happens in third degree heart block is this. They don't match, right? So I still have my regular interval R to R's, and I still have my regular interval P to P's, but because my atrial rate does not match my ventricular rate, my PR intervals do not remain fixed, and they do not talk to each other. My heart is completely separate on the top and the bottom. They're just both living their own best lives, okay? So that's why sometimes you can get a little P wave that's hidden in a QRS complex, because every now and then they'll happen at the same time, okay? So that's that example. Let's look and see what it looks like on the screen, okay? So I like to think about heart blocks in a story of a bad relationship or a bad marriage, something gone wrong, okay? First degree block, remember we're looking at our bigger intervals here, right? So one spouse goes out home and comes home late, but at the same time every night. So this is our marriage, our relationship, maybe our roommate, friendship, whatever. It's starting to get a little bad. Maybe they used to come home at 5 o'clock after work, right? Because 5 boxes or less is a normal PR interval. They used to come home at 5. Now they're coming home at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And then again, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And then 8, 8, 8, 8.
What's her name? That's all.
Karen. Hopefully nobody's name is Karen in here. So, is anybody's name Karen?
No.
I didn't think so. So I'm looking
But I
at
love
everybody.
Karen jokes.
Yeah. Okay, so Karen, right? She's coming home late. She's stopping by the bar on her way home from work, right? She's stressed out. She's like, I can't do this anymore. She's late. She comes home on time every night. It's fixed. She just comes home late. She never not comes home, right? She never drops. She's always coming home. She's just late. First degree block. We're starting to have a bad relationship, bad friendship, whatever. Are we regular or irregular? Regular. We have P waves.
Yes.
We have a fixed
Yes.
but prolonged PR interval. That's also important. I need y'all to pay attention to that before we move forward. I'm going to point that out. Each of these on the PR interval, it describes it here in the box. PR interval for first degree is fixed and prolonged. The test is going to show you this strip, and it's going to ask you, what is the PR interval? You're not going to measure it. The first degree, you can kind of measure it, but you're going to give the description answer. So we would call this fixed and prolonged, and that's the answer choice you would pick. Okay?
Fixed and prolonged.
Fixed and prolonged. It's a descriptor of the PR.
Hello.
Second degree. Are we regular or irregular?
Irregular.
Irregular. Do we have P waves?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Do we have a problem with our PR interval?
Yes.
We do. This is a normal PR interval right here, right?
Yes.
It's about 3 boxes. So that's normal, but remember, we gotta look at multiple. Let's go to our next one. Is this the same?
No.
No, it gets longer, so that's a problem with my PR interval. I'm thinking heart block. I know I'm irregular, so I have to be a type of second degree, right? That's that protocol you follow. So, our PR intervals, what's happening? Can anybody describe it to me? It gets longer, and then it drops. It gets shorter, it gets longer, and then it drops. It has a pattern.
So what's Karen doing now?
Karen is deciding to come home later and later each night until one night, she doesn't come home at all. She hooked up at the bar, guys. She found somebody.
Maybe she wasn't
Back
driving.
here. What?
You say she coped up?
No, she hooked up. She got hooked up.
Maybe both.
I was thinking she
If
passed
it
the
helps you
EKG
remember, it
test.
helps you remember, right? So, she came home on time. She's given her best effort, right? She
Okay.
came home on time. And then Karen's like, no, I'm going to the bar. I'm staying out late again. So she comes home late. And then she doesn't come home at all. Maybe she went and had a girls' night and decided to not come home,
Sure,
right?
that's
So she dropped,
Okay.
okay? And then it's gonna happen again. She comes home on time. She comes home late. She doesn't come home at all. But I can predict when she doesn't come home, right? Because I know, based off of her getting home later and later, that she's not gonna come home at all. So for me, she's in first place. And that's why it's second degree type 1, because I can predict when she's not coming home, based off of that PR interval, okay? Now I wanna point something else out. We talked about how our P to P, we said our R to R is irregular, right? Our P to P is also irregular here. So we have this interval here, and if I were to take it over, it's a little offset. And if I were to take it over again, it doesn't line up to this next one, right? So if you're looking more at the numbers, if you want to focus on the numbers and the actual, like what's going on in the heart, you can also look at your P to P interval because it's not going to match up in type 1, okay? Now in type 2, it does match up. We're going to see that in a minute. So second degree block type 2, are we regular or irregular? Irregular. Do we have P waves? We do. Do we have any problems with our PR interval?
Yeah.
We do, right? This may be a normal PR interval. Right here, we go over 1, 2, 3, 4 boxes. Again, 1, 2, 3, 4 boxes. So far so good, right? But then what happens right here? There is none. I drop. That's a problem with my PR interval. I started with a P and I did not have an R. So that's a problem with my PR interval. I'm thinking heart block. I know I'm irregular, so it has to be a type of second degree. Can anybody describe to me what's going on with this PR interval? Can you describe what it is? It's regular, it's fixed, right? We call that fixed. because it remains the same. So it's fixed, but with dropped beats. So the test may ask you, what's this PR interval? You're not gonna measure it, you're gonna say fixed, but with dropped beats. Okay, that's also on this sheet. So, in this description, Karen, she's coming home on time. She's coming home at the same time each night, right? She comes home on time. She comes home on time. I'm thinking everything's nice and dandy and fine, and then she doesn't come home at all, just suddenly, randomly, right? I can't predict based off of this if she's coming home or not. So for that reason, she's in second place. Y'all see that? So in second degree type 1, I can predict when she's not coming home. It gets shorter. She comes home later, and then I know because she's coming home later, she's eventually not going to come home at all. So we drop. Whereas in second degree type 2, she comes home at the same time. She comes home at the same time. I have no clue, and then suddenly she's not home at all. So if I was going to have a bad friendship, right, bad roommate, she would be in second place because I can't predict it.
So I would take a question.
Go ahead.
Like on this strip that you're giving us an example, it looks like there is a pattern.
So this is the most commonly missed strip on the test. I need everybody to take a picture of it, memorize that second degree type. Okay. This is the most commonly missed strip, and the reason for it being is there is a pattern. It's not the pattern we're looking for. What is our AV, our PR interval, right? Is the time it takes to go from our SA node to our AV node. We call these heart blocks AV heart blocks. They are issues starting from the AV node, which is our PR interval, okay? We are not concerned with the pattern of the QRSs. This is ventricles, okay? We're talking about our PR interval, not the frequency of our QRSs. So when you're looking and you're trying to determine if it's a second degree type 1 or type 2, I don't want you to ever look at the QRSs. I only want you to look at the PR interval. So is this PR interval the same or does it change?
The same.
The same, right? We have 4 boxes and then we have 4 boxes. It doesn't get longer, it doesn't change. That's what we're concerned about. There is a pattern, I'm not gonna deny it, guys. 1, 2, drop, 1, 2, drop. But it could go after this, 1, 2, 3, 4, drop, drop, drop. I don't know because this is fixed, okay? It doesn't give me any clues. So the other way you can tell the difference between second degree type 1 and type 2, like I said, is that P to P interval. So I'm gonna back up to second degree type 1 real quick. Was this P to P interval regular or irregular?
Irregular.
Irregular. In second degree type 2, is this P to P interval regular or irregular?
Regular.
It's regular, okay? So look at your P to P interval. If the little story and the little frequency thing messes you up, just ignore the QRSs. Look at that P to P interval and your R to R intervals. That's the most important thing. Like I said, the test is tricky, and this is the greatest example of the tricky strip because it's actually giving you that pattern, trying to mess you up. Do you see kind of how the prophecy test is doing that a little bit? It wants to make sure you know that for AV heart blocks, you're looking at your PR interval and not the frequency of the QRSs. Okay. I hope I didn't confuse you.
The only time it makes a difference is a heart rate.
For the,
QR.
yeah. So then let's talk about third degree. So complete heart block, third degree heart block. Is our R interval regular or irregular? Regular. It's just slow, right? Remember AV heart blocks, my AV node, that backup pacemaker, he's slow, right? Remember the very beginning of the presentation we talked about it? He's just slow. We also have P waves. They're here to here. Do I have a regular P to P interval?
Yeah.
I do. They're wide and they're slow too, but they're there. Sometimes you get P waves that are hidden in other things. So we're gonna take this P wave and this P wave here, we're gonna march it out. That matches up. This would be a T wave, okay? We're gonna take this interval and see if it matches up to the next one, and it does. And it does. And it does. So my atria are going at a rate of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, where my ventricles are going at a rate of 1, 2, 3, 4. So my atria are going like this, and my ventricles are going like this. Okay, and that's why it gets disjointed. It's not lined up. Okay, it's like this paper transparency sheet example I gave. So if prophecy shows you this strip and it asks you to measure the PR interval, you're going to say not measurable, because this is not the same as that, right? So I don't know which PR interval is a true PR interval. There's really no true PR interval, so I'm not even going to try to measure it. It's too chaotic. It's too messed up. Okay. So to recap, for heart blocks, we have first, second degree, and third degree heart blocks. Remember, second degree has type 1 and type 2. First and third have a regular R to R interval. Second degree, both type 1 and type 2 are irregular. Okay? First degree is fixed and prolonged. You can see here we're more than 5 boxes. We're at 8 boxes, and it's 8 boxes all the way across, right? Second degree, irregular. Type 1, remember, is that predictable one. It's a pattern. Karen comes home late, later, even later, and I know based off of her getting home later and later and later that she's eventually going to drop and not come home at all. And then again, she's going to come home late. Later, I know based off of her coming home later that she's eventually going to drop. Okay? So she's in first place because I can predict when she's going to drop. Second degree type 2 is not predictable because we are fixed. You see we are 6 boxes here, another 6 boxes there, another 6 boxes there. That PR interval, Karen's coming home at the same time every night. And then suddenly, randomly, she just drops. And then maybe she comes home again on time, and then she drops again. Do you see? That's a better example of a type 2. But you can kind of see how, I'm going to come back to this slide, guys. See this type 2? You see how they line up those QRSs to trick you? Right? So remember, we're looking at our PR intervals. And then third degree heart block, we have that regular R to R, very slow, and then we have these P waves. Now, this is a really good slide, and I like it down here at the bottom, because it shows you P waves that are hidden inside other complexes. Just like on my little transparency example here that I have, and we have it lined up where this P wave right here is inside my QRS, right? This has that as well. We have a P wave hidden here at the end of the T wave, and then one within the QRS here. So these P waves are very distinct, right? You can see those. If I were to take this interval right here and then march it out, I would assume that my next P wave would be right here. And then if I were to march that out, I could find that there is a pattern based off of my guesstimation of where they're at. Now, you can still see in an EKG tracing with a very fine detail, if you really pay attention to the tracing, you can still see where these hidden P waves are. I want you to take a look at this little inverted T wave right here coming back up. It comes up all the way, and then it turns flat, right? If you come and look at this one, we come up, and then we almost go like a little hump before we come back to the line. That's that little P wave giving a little bit of extra, very fine amount of extra electricity that it comes up and over the line versus this one. The other thing, this P wave hidden in this QRS. See how this QRS right here is very skinny? It's at most probably 1.5 boxes to 2 boxes across at its widest point, but the top of it is very narrow. This one is just ever so slightly more wide. He's about 2.5 boxes across at his widest point, and even at the top of him, he's a little bit more chunky. That's that little extra P wave, adding in just a little bit of extra electricity to make him wider. So that's how you can kind of see if he's in there. Okay, he kind of kicks over to the side a little bit. I think about this, it's like the 2012 Oscars, and Angelina Jolie wore that really long dress with that slit in it, and in all the pictures she was posing like this, you know, with her leg out to the side. That's what I think of when I see that. She's out to the side with her leg, okay? It's kicking over some of the electricity. She's probably unpredictable. Yes, probably, yes. Okay, any questions on heart blocks? We're gonna do drills. It's gonna solidify in your brain in a minute, guys. Okay, we're gonna do some drills and practice drills. Pace rhythms. These are on the test. You do need to know the difference between atrial pace, ventricular pace, and atrial ventricular pace, okay? You don't need to know DDD, DTO, failure to capture, failure to sense, all that's not on it. But we do need to know where the pacer spike is occurring and what it's associated with. So atrial ventricular pacing, we are dual chamber pacing. We are pacing for both chambers of the heart, both the top and the bottom. So you're gonna see a pacer spike, this very straight up and down, narrow thing, before your P wave, and then immediately before your QRS as well. So this would be your atrial pacer spike, because remember, P wave, atria, and then this would be your ventricular spike, because it's happening before your ventricles, your QRS. Single chamber pacing, this is an example of ventricular pacing. Now I get some people that get this one wrong. They want to call this atrial pace because it's just ever so slightly offset from the ventricle. If this was an atrial pacer spike, it would happen more back here, okay? Remember, your atria, your PR interval is like 5 boxes, right? Is this little thing right here 5 boxes? No, that's not an atrial pacer spike. This is a ventricular pacer spike. It's close enough. It would be closer to the ventricles than it would be to the P wave, where the P wave would be PR interval. So this is ventricular pacing. You can also have just atrial pacing, where you have a pacer spike just before the atria and then no pacer spike with the ventricle. Okay. So those are the 3 different types. They will be on the test. I had a lot of people miss this recently. We kind of communicate like in the best way. But memorize this. If you need to take a picture of this slide, just know that the pacer spikes, usually see how this is much further back for the atria versus the ventricle one. It's like right on top of it or immediately before it. If you want to take a picture of this page, these are some websites that we recommend you practice on. I like the first one. I don't think the second one is working right now, but you can try it still. You can just also Google EKG practice strips, and there's a lot of stuff up there, guys, you can practice on. This is the book I'm going to email to you all. So, little spiel here. I'm going to take that sign-in sheet, so if you didn't sign in on the sign-in sheet, make sure you do, because that's how I know who to email this to. This is about 60 pages. It goes over everything I did and a lot more, okay? We take the same test every year, guys. It's the annual EKG. For those of you who are new, we do this test annually. I recommend you take this, and you can study it from your computer if you want. What I did is I took it to Office Depot, the file like on a USB, or I emailed it to myself or something like that. I took it to Office Depot, they printed it in color for me, and then I had them bind it for like $10. So that way every year when we take this new test, I have my little book that I can study from. We have about 10 copies of this in our education classroom, our education office upstairs on 3 West that we do rent out to people. But again, we only have 10 copies. So there's like 1,500 clinical staff that we service here. So I send it digitally as well, okay? But y'all will all get this pretty much after class. Okay. What questions?